Before I get into this video, I just want to make this quick little disclaimer. I am by no means an expert on the topic of climate change, pollution, or anything pertaining to the environment, nor do I claim to be. Nor am I anti-American. My only mission with this video, and others like it, is to stimulate productive discourse on some of the ways in which I believe America can improve its ways. And in this video in particular, I want to talk about some of the ways that I believe the US can do a better job of pulling its weight in regards to mitigating climate change, or the effects of climate change. Because let's face it, right now, if I want to experience bike lanes, public transit, or other stereotypically European things, I can get on a plane and fly to Europe. Right now, I can go to the airport and do that. But there is no airplane that can help me escape the effects of climate change. Bearing that in mind, here are a few of the things that I've observed European countries doing, and this is just from my 14 months living there, particularly in the Netherlands. These are some of the things that I've observed European countries doing in order to mitigate the effects of climate change. The first of which being charging for trash collection on a per gram or per kilogram basis. So basically, here in the US, this is what the trash cans look like, at least in Dallas or the DFW area. Pretty much everyone has these city appointed trash cans, and you can see the blue is for trash, the green is for recyclables. And it's my understanding that you have to pay a flat fee for these trash cans. And I don't know if it's per month or per year, but basically you pay a flat fee, and that's pretty much it. The only time you pay extra is when you leave extra stuff outside of the trash can, so maybe furniture or things like that. But generally speaking, you're gonna pay a flat fee. In the Netherlands, I don't know about the other European countries, but in the Netherlands, that is not the case. And this was actually one of my biggest culture shocks upon arriving there, was realizing that they charge on a per gram or per kilogram basis. Again, I don't remember the exact details of it, but I do remember that it was according to the weight of your trash. If you had 20 kilograms of trash in your can, so to speak, you would pay more money than the person who had 10 kilograms. Now, when I first arrived there, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really understand that. I didn't really think that that was an effective way of mitigating waste, unnecessary waste, because in my mind, people would simply put their trash in other people's cans, or even worse, litter. And I'm sure that some people do. I'm sure that there are people out there who aren't trying to pay that extra fee. But from what I could tell, because the Netherlands was a very clean country, at least the parts that I went to, they were very clean, not completely devoid of litter, but mostly devoid of litter. From what I can tell, people get around paying that extra money because, look, Dutch people are very frugal. They're known for being very frugal, and they don't want to pay extra money for things that they don't have to. So they basically get around this by simply being responsible. By being responsible and organizing their trash in the right way. So they're not throwing recyclables in the trash bin or vice versa, because they don't want to pay the extra money. Here in the US, at least in my experience and in my observation, people are not nearly as diligent about organizing or separating their trash. In fact, here, like I showed you earlier, there's only the trash and the recyclables. That's it. In the Netherlands, and this was also true pretty much everywhere else I went to in Europe, I believe, especially in Spain, if I recall correctly, you have multiple different kinds of trash bins. So you have the glass, you have your plastic, you have your cardboard and paper, and then you have your trash. And maybe there are even more categorizations than that. The point is, in the Netherlands, and I imagine in much of Europe, they're much more diligent about organizing their trash and just not being wasteful, not unnecessarily throwing things away. And of course, if just one person is doing this, it probably doesn't make that big of a difference. But when you have the majority of a nation of 18 million people doing it, it's going to make a very pronounced difference. Now imagine if you had a nation of 300 million plus people doing it. Think about that. You can see that rabbit over there. If you're wondering why I'm looking that way, this is who we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect the rabbits. I think this one's a bit scared of me, so I'm gonna walk on this side. But that is one thing that I think if America implemented, we could make a very, very profound difference on climate change and on the environment as a whole. Or maybe not, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I have to imagine that if all of these countries are doing this, there must be something to it. Now, the next thing that America can do to mitigate climate change, to mitigate its effect on climate change, is disincentivize people from buying gas guzzling cars. So if you can see over there, that's just one example of a car that somebody owns here. Looks like maybe a Ford F-350, I want to say. Ford F-350 or something similar. You have somebody here with an SUV. I'm not trying to put all these people on blast, by the way. I'm just pointing out observations. These are just things that I'm noticing. Most people here are driving trucks and SUVs. The vast majority of people. Okay, this right here, Dodge Ram. They have an SUV as well. The majority of people here drive trucks. Now here's my thing, okay, maybe this is just the American in me, but I believe that people should have the right to drive whatever they want. If you have the money to purchase a specific car that you have your eyes on, then you should be able to go and get that car. I don't think that people shouldn't be allowed to get trucks or SUVs. What I will say is that I think that people should have to pay extra for their preferences. I believe that if you want to create a disproportionate amount, look, you see truck, truck, truck. There's another truck over there. Trucks everywhere, especially here in Texas. I think that if you want to drive a truck, you should be able to. I think this is actually an electric truck. I don't know if I've ever seen an electric Ford F-150. That's pretty cool. But anyways, I get distracted really easily if you can't tell, but I think if you want to get a truck, you should be able to, but you should have to pay an emissions tax because trucks and SUVs don't get nearly the fuel efficiency that your average compact or subcompact car would get. Like the cars that, there's another truck right there, another truck right there. Like your average cars that people in Europe drive. I mean, in the Netherlands, every other person has either a Toyota Aygo, a Ford Fiesta, or something similar. Here, the Ford F-150 is literally the best-selling car. It is literally the best-selling car. People here prefer trucks. And again, if you want to get a truck, put a lift kit on it, then hey, you have the right to do that. If you worked for it, you should be able to do that. But you should also have to pay extra. It's my understanding that here in the US, we don't have a carbon tax. You don't have to pay extra for having a vehicle that creates a disproportionate amount of pollution in the environment. And I think you should. I think you should be quote unquote penalized for wanting that kind of car. Because let's face it, you're one person who's creating a disproportionate amount of pollution in the environment. Now obviously cars aren't the end all be all when it comes to pollution. And again, I'm not an expert, but I mean, that's just common sense and common knowledge. There are other factors at play as well. But again, one person driving a truck doesn't really make that big of a difference. But when a nation of 300 million plus people collectively decides that it prefers trucks, that's problematic. That is problematic. And we're not talking about work trucks. There's somebody down there, I don't know if you can see it, but they have a work truck. They have a trailer in the back and they're probably hauling a lot of heavy equipment. Cool. They should be able to get the trucks and even maybe take advantage of the Section 179 deduction for getting vehicles over 6,000 pounds. But entrepreneurs like myself, content creators, and content creators are going to hate me for saying this, but I don't think that somebody who talks to a camera for a living should be incentivized to go and get a G-Wagon that gets 14 miles to the gallon. I just don't really see the purpose in that. Personally, I don't know, it doesn't really make much logical sense to me. And this is something that I myself could potentially benefit from. Maybe if I was making a little more money, if you could get this video to, I don't know, 5 million views or whatever. But in all seriousness, this is something that I think America really needs to fix. And there are multiple ways that you could go about this. Again, you can implement a carbon tax, or you can make the roads smaller to create induced demand for smaller vehicles. I don't think that would go over very well with the American populace, personally, especially in a place like Texas. Look, we're stubborn here. People here are very stubborn. I'm stubborn as well. I think that's because I'm from Texas. I kind of developed that quality within myself, but I don't think forcing people to change their preferences is really the ideal way of going about it with this kind of populace. I think that it's a much more efficient and effective long-term strategy to simply disincentivize people's preferences. Now, the next way that America can start pulling its weight in mitigating the effects of climate change is to begin investing in alternate forms of transportation. So a lot of people here, again, they drive trucks, they drive cars. Cars are the end-all be-all in most of the US. Now, in this neighborhood in particular, there are sidewalks. You can kind of walk places, but I mean, if you've noticed in the background of a lot of my recent videos, you don't really see a whole lot of stores or anything because it's mostly just houses. There are a lot of houses. I think this is, no, it's not a dead end. 2 rabbits right here. Again, this is who we're protecting, the rabbits. But people here rely on cars. By and large, they rely on cars unless they live in places like New York or Boston, or places that were built up before the advent of the car. This is a problem, because if you think about it, when people have to rely on cars, what are they going to do? They're going to go with the biggest, most spacious car that they can get. This is why people are going with trucks. This is why they're going with these larger sedans or SUVs, because they're more spacious, more roomy. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Having been in those subcompact cars and having been in some of these larger SUVs that the American market prefers, the SUVs are more comfortable. They are leaps and bounds more comfortable, more spacious, more roomy, often with more amenities. But if we had access to an extensive bus line, or if we had bike lanes, or if we had a more extensive train system here, I would prefer that over the comfortable American cars, personally. And on the off chance that I would need a car, I wouldn't feel compelled to invest in a truck like that one, because what's the purpose? I'm only going to drive it maybe once or twice a week anyways. And I work from home, so I'm in a very unique situation. But for people who do work a 9 to 5, which is the majority of the population here, I think that if they could get to work with the bus or the train or even by cycling, which we're a long way from that, by the way, especially in Dallas, we're a very, very long way from that. But if we could, hypothetically, if people could commute with these alternative forms of transportation, there would be no need to go about investing in these big, spacious, luxurious cars. The only people who would probably get the cars at that point would be the people who just have it like that and can afford to go and get a BMW like this to just drive once or twice a week. But this is something that, I mean, when you think about traffic, when you're caught in a traffic jam and you see 100 cars in front of you, you have to start asking yourself, what if 75% of these people in these cars were riding the bus instead? It'd make for a much better driving experience, and it'd be much more efficient from an environmental standpoint, much more environmentally friendly. And furthermore, it'd probably be a lot easier on people's pockets. But that's a different discussion for a different day. The next thing that I think America can do as a country in order to mitigate the effects of climate change is stop incentivizing people to use plastic bags at the grocery stores. So to be fair, there are states, I know California for sure is one of them, that disincentivize people from using these plastic bags. So in California, I think maybe a plastic bag is something like 50 cents, I want to say. Somewhere between 25 and 75 cents. Maybe it's increased or gone down, I don't know. Here in Texas, those bags are free. When you go to the grocery store, the plastic bags are free 99. They cost zero extra money. So what do people do? They get as many of the bags as they can. Because, look, and this is kind of an American thing, but if you're an American, tell me I'm lying about this. Pretty much everyone here has a drawer or a cabinet solely dedicated to carrying those plastic bags. They have a drawer or cabinet full of plastic bags, and they use those plastic bags maybe as trash bags, or whenever they feel like they might need another bag for whatever reason, they use those plastic bags. But this is not a thing in Europe from what I recall. This is not a thing because pretty much everyone that I saw there was using reusable bags. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was in Europe, I was using reusable bags too. And since I've been here in the US, I've been here for about 2 weeks now, I have felt a sense of guilt every time I've used the plastic bags. And I should get a reusable bag or a few reusable bags and try to set the example for those around me. But at the same time, I'm trying to save money, and those plastic bags are free. Now, I'm still gonna get the reusable bags, don't worry, I am. I wanna practice what I preach. I'm not perfect, but I do want to be a man of integrity at the very least. But in a place like California, or furthermore, a place like Europe, it wouldn't even be a discussion. I would definitely opt for the reusable bags because the plastic bags cost money every time you use them. And this is literally so simple to implement. It's so simple, it would take no extra effort. And stores could probably profit more. Well, I guess they couldn't because you only have to buy the reusable bags once or twice. But they could still make money, especially on the front end of implementing these kinds of policies for the reusable bags. So I don't know why stores have not opted to do this, but coming back here and seeing those plastic bags just rolling down the road, stuck up in the trees and things like that, that's actually served as a pretty big reverse culture shock for me. Because I don't think in the 14 months that I spent in the Netherlands, I ever saw that happen. Because people there simply do not use them.